Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of the Bracket Busters podcast. I am your host, Elliot Crow, and we are currently tuning in on a Thursday on October 30th, the day before Halloween. And let me just get this out here right now. In my Dynasty Fantasy Football League, I have Mark Andrews, and I wanted to cut this man more times than I can possibly count. I draft Harold Fan in third round of my rookie draft, and now he's on bye this week. Mark Andrews is, at time of recording this message, already has 2 touchdowns. So, this man might project, carry me up to going to a 5-4 record because my dynasty team, I have lost let's see here. I have lost 3 Cardinals running backs, right? Yeah, technically, yes, because I lost Benson, I lost Connor, and then I thought Dave Mercado was going to be the guy, and he's not the guy. So, anyway, outside of that, and my king Mark Andrews absolutely going off for me in my Fantasy Football Dynasty League, we are here today to talk about the Atlantic 10. So we, at the time of this recording, are mere days away from opening day of college basketball this season. And if you've been following me along on my Substack at bracketbusterhoops.com, you have been following all kinds of roster reviews throughout the season. We've covered a lot of A10. We've covered some Missouri Valley. We've covered some others, the American, some other conferences as well. We've done a ton of different ones here. And now I kind of want to take a moment before going into the season and discuss the A10 as a whole. Because in particular this season, I know we make jokes and we call it the zero bid league, and actually it's the thumbnail of this video. If you don't have context what the zero bid league thing is, it's very much a meme on Twitter, and it's fans of programs in the A10, they say they deserve 0 bids. It's a whole thing, but it's the running joke of this. With that being said, though, man, I'm gonna probably stick my foot in my mouth by the end of this season, but I firmly do believe the A10 can have multiple bids this year. However, this year, there's like 5 teams that could all win this thing. I firmly believe that. So I kind of want to take some time, and I really want to go down. Exhibitions have been going on. We've been getting kind of a taste of what these starting lineups are going to look like, what the teams are going to look like, and, you can take an exhibition result with a grain of salt for sure. With that being said, though, I firmly believe this conference could be a multi-bid league this year. So let's just go ahead and start diving straight into some stuff here. Let's talk about what I'm going to do is I'm going to go team by team by team in the ranking of my preseason list here. So before we get started, I'm just going to go ahead and toss my list out there. That way, if you completely disagree with me, you can just stop watching this video. Or if you're like, wow, man, this guy's an idiot, I want to hear what he says about St. Louis, then, stick around and you can skip to that part of the video if you want to. But anyway, so in order of the teams that I have in terms of what I think they will finish in the Atlantic 10 is number 1, George Washington. I think that's... Some people are disagreeing with that. It's like the A10 has been very hard to predict throughout this entire offseason, and the closer we've gotten, I've seen a lot of just polls all over the place here. But okay, going in order here, I have George Washington winning it all. I have VCU coming in second. I have Loyola Chicago third, St. Louis fourth, Dayton fifth. I have George Mason sixth, Duquesne seventh, St. Bonaventure eighth, St. Joseph's ninth, and then finishing out the rest, I have Richmond, Rhode Island, Davidson, Fordham, and LaSalle. So I'm kind of checking them off because we're going to not talk as much about them because I will say this. Richmond has done a fantastic job. They had a really bad year last year, but I think they're building that back up. They're building that back up, actually. They're one of the top 15 highest risers from last season's final KenPom rating to this season's preseason KenPom rating. So they are doing right things. It's just I don't think they're quite there yet. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start diving into each and every team of the Atlantic 10. Okay, look, I firmly believe that the George Washington Revolutionaries can win the Atlantic 10. Again, there is the top 5 teams that I ripped off, and we're going to cover each one of them. I think any of them can win this league, but I'm just going with George Washington first. I think it's going to be I called SIUE last year. Nobody's going to probably remember that coming out of the Ohio Valley. Probably nobody cares about that anyway. The fact that I called my shot and that worked. This is my shot I'm calling this year. I think George Washington can absolutely do it. The main reason is Rafael Castro. The dude has NBA potential. He's an absolute stud. He's a 6'11 big man, Kind of on the skinnier side of a traditional center. No big deal, though, especially playing in college basketball these days. He averaged 14 points, 8.9 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 1.2 steals, and 1.4 blocks. The dude's an absolute menace on offense. He's an absolute menace on defense. I mean, he can just do it all. He's the type of guy that can take your team from, middle of the pack to taking it to that elite elevated status. And, he's not the only one. They got Trey Autry. He averaged 10.4 points, 3.7 rebounds, 1 assist, and 1 steal. They got Christian Jones. He averaged 8.7 points, 2.2 rebounds, 2.6 assists, and 1.7 steals. So that's just like looking at the returnees. That's not even talking about who, Chris Caputo brought in terms of transfers and freshmen. In terms of the transfers, they brought in Trey Dinkins. He's an interconference transfer coming out of Duquesne. He averaged 13 points per game last year, 3.1 assists. They brought in Tyrone Marshall Jr. He averaged 12.9 points, 3.1 assists. They brought in Boo Boo Benjamin. He averaged 13.9 points, 4.6 rebounds. They brought in Gene Arangern. Sure. Anyway, he averaged 14.2 points, 5.5 rebounds, 4.2 assists, and 1.1 steals. So these are guys who kind of transferred up, outside with the exception of Trey Dinkins. Trey Dinkins came from Duquesne, so interconference transfer here. But there was some transferred up from a little bit of a lower conference. Some of them maybe lesser than others. With that being said, though, these guys were kind of the go-to guys on those teams, and I don't care what anybody says. Like, if you're a go-to guy on a mid-major team, you're going to be able to play at the Atlantic 10 level, and you're going to be able to really contribute at an Atlantic 10 level. So my point being here is they got Rafael Castro. They have like 5 guys who could all be elite scorers on this offense. What I love is they have multiple ball handlers. That's something I'm very passionate about when I look at rosters, and I'm like, yes, this team has the potential, because you don't limit yourself. Seeing a great example is I'm an Indiana Pacers fan, and seeing what the Pacers are looking like right now with quite literally no point guard on the roster speaks for itself, in the fact that if you don't have a playmaker, you don't have a guy that can handle the ball, it's a really big struggle to create offense for your team. So here they have multiple guys that can do that. You have Rafael Castro down low, and then you have returnees they've all played very important roles. And this isn't even counting. I was just talking about their transfers. They have a really good freshman named Jalen Rogier-Roan, I believe is how I pronounce it, I believe I pronounce it correctly. But he picked George Washington over Vanderbilt and Xavier and a ton of other really good programs. He's coming in. I don't think, this team's like really loaded with a lot of veteran experience. I don't think a freshman's going to crack a major role in the rotation, but I think he's going to contribute on the rotation. My point is just being, though, that like George Washington has a lot of momentum going for them coming into this year. My problem is this. This is the one thing I don't love about the state of college basketball at the moment. And it is the fact that their non-conference schedule is just not good. It's too weak. They're not going to get an at-large bid. I think the only chance they can get an at-large bid, they got to win like 28 games in this regular season. And then they got to like lose in the conference championship or something. Like, it's going to have to be something just... Even then, I don't know if you get in because of the way the committee's going these days, and I think the committee's really going to stick mid-majors this year because they want to expand the tournament. They're going to be like, oh, guys, hey, look at only 5 mid-majors got a tournament, or only 5 teams out of the non-conference got into the tournament, so let's expand the tournament. And then they're going to give all those bids to the power conference. Anyway, different video, different soapbox for a different day. My point being, though, the non-conference is not good enough to get into the NCAA tournament. So you're going to have a lot of wins. I think this team can do it. The problem being, though, the A-10 is going to be brutal. It's a gauntlet this year of teams that are at that same level, same caliber of a team. So, I mean, you gotta be perfect. You gotta be perfect. You might be able to take one bad loss and still get in if you don't win the Atlantic 10 tournament. The way that they're going to seal themselves is obviously winning the Atlantic 10 tournament. It's going to be their best bet. And I do think they can do it. The ceiling's exceptionally high for this team. They have an incredible offense. They are really strong on on-ball defense. They have multiple guys coming in with over 1 steal per game average last season. They already have the returning guys who are good on-ball defenders as well. I really, 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 really do think that Chris Caputo's team this season could be the chance that George Washington returns back to the NCAA tournament this season. Okay, in second place, I have VCU. They were picked preseason in terms of the overall, the actual official A10 poll. They were picked to win the conference again this year, and it's easy to see why. I said this multiple times now that there's like 5 teams that could all win this conference here, and VCU's definitely another one of them. They're going to be really good. They have Tyler Ward coming in from LSU. I like him a lot. He averaged 9.1 points, 2.3 rebounds. He's got that SEC experience, even though LSU and the SEC's, which, side note, really shocking to me. I don't know if the NIL money is just not there because they're blowing their entire NIL budget on football, and now they're blowing their entire NIL budget and athletic budget on their coach. Anyway, I'm really just stunned that Matt McMahon has not been able to win there. Side note off that. So, Tyrell Ward, he had a really good season last year for LSU in the SEC. He's going to be able to come down and contribute even more. Barry Evans is coming in. He's a stud at Bryant. He averaged 13.3 points, 6.8 rebounds, 1.3 steals per game. They brought Jadrian Trevy in from Oregon. He started in 38 games over 2 seasons for the Ducks. Last year, he averaged about 7 points, 2.8 rebounds, 1.7 assists. Keyshawn Mitchell is a big piece here. He's 6'11". He averaged 8.5 points, 6.8 rebounds at Bryant last year as well. And have you heard of Lazar Dracovic? Probably not, no, but he had a really good year at Charleston. He's a 6'11 center. He averaged 8 points, 6.3 rebounds. This is an entirely new roster for VCU, obviously, because, the coaching changed there. However, I think that this is automatically in year one a deep enough roster to win this conference. Definitely deep enough roster to be competing at the top of the conference. What I like is they brought a mix, right? They brought a mix of guys coming up from the lower ranks, and then they have a nice mix of guys coming down from power conference. But the difference is, it's not guys coming down from the power conference who didn't play and average 2 points a game. You're talking about guys coming down from a higher conference that started. Like, look, I know LSU might not have been the tip of the SEC last year, but Oregon's a good basketball program. You're bringing in multiple guys here who have contributed at that higher level, and it's going to be really important for them. So looking at more of the preseason accolades for this team, Evans, Tracy, and Ward, they were all named preseason all-conference second team. They also have Amon Noel. He was named to the third team all-conference. It's going to be defensive first team. There's no doubt about that. When I'm talking about George Washington's going to be able to score 90 points a game. Are they going to do that? Probably not. But they have the potential to do it. They're going to crack 100 multiple times. I firmly believe that. This team is probably not going to do that. Not to the Virginia level, like 40 points a game, but they're going to definitely be defensive heavy. I think that's how they're going to run their entire schemes here, which totally fine. Defense wins championships. Firmly believe that. But yeah, I think VCU has a lot of potential here. I think they could easily win the Atlantic 10, and I have them slated second here. And I think I'm really excited to see what the Rams do, because if the A10 wants to have multiple bids, VCU's gonna have to be good. That's how we're in this segment. Okay, in third place, I have the Loyola Chicago Ramblers. Miles Rubin is one of the best big men in the entire country. I'm actually not going to spend a whole lot of time here. I'll drop a link and have a little clip here when we're doing the video. And if you're listening on Spotify or listening on Substack, there's a whole other podcast about this. But I did an entire 35-minute video on Loyola Chicago, so I'm not going to go too in-depth here. You can go watch that if you want to learn the real depths. I went through the entire roster, who I think is going to be starting, the expectations I have. But my expectations are high. And the main reason being Miles Rubin's coming back. I'm so excited to see him and Rafael Castro go at it against each other. I know they've done it before, but I'm just saying, I am really excited because these two teams are at a very similar caliber, and I think it's gonna be a battle down low. Miles Rubin, he's just as good as Rafael Castro. I think he's got NBA potential. He averaged 9.6 points, 5.5 rebounds, 1.3 assists. The notable thing, though, is 2.3 blocks. He had an 11.4% blocking percentage last year. That was 12th in the country. So, dude is an absolute menace inside on defense. But in short summary, some of the other guys that they have coming in that's going to be super important, they brought in Dawook Tavares. He came from Charleston. He's a lights-out shooter. He's going to be huge for the Ramblers. Justin Moore is back and healthy. Really suffered when he went down with an injury last year, and he was balling. He was averaging a 5.3 to 1.4 assist-to-turnover ratio. It was a 41.5% assist rate. Just freaking insane when you see those stats. Was he going to keep that up all year? Probably not. But if he can get close to replicating that at all throughout this entire season and stay healthy, huge addition for this team. There's a bunch of other guys on this team. I would recommend go watch that video. It's going to be a really huge deep dive. Go listen to that podcast episode. Really, we go into a lot of details there, but I think the Ramblers are going to be really good, and I do think the Ramblers could easily win this conference as well. Okay, so this is going to be the team that a lot of people think could win the conference and actually could be part of the multi-bid, and I don't disagree. St. Louis. So St. Louis, Robbie Avila's back. St. Louis, okay, everybody was like, Josh Schertz is coming off this NIT run with Indiana State. Indiana State got screwed out of the NCAA tournament, but they got to go in that run. Yeah, they got to play at Hinkle. All this great stuff. I think everybody had like really, really high expectations for Schertz coming into last year, and it just didn't pan out. They had some injuries that just didn't work out the way that they thought it was going to, but Robbie Avila was still very good last year. He's 6'10". He averaged 17.3 points, 6.9 rebounds, 4 assists, and 1.2 steals for SLU last year. He's going to be the go-to guy once again. What I like, though, is they brought in Paul Otieno from Quinnipiac, and he dominated last year. He averaged 13 points, 8.6 rebounds, and 2.1 blocks per game. Him and Amari Monroe were huge last year for the Bobcats. And I think even though he played in the MAC, Quinnipiac was still a very good program. So I think he's going to translate very well to this higher level. And I think, man, him and Robbie Avila are going to be fun to watch play together in that rotation. I'm really excited about him. I think it's going to be like a 1-2 punch for SLU here. They also brought in Dion Brown. He's coming in from Boston College. He averaged 7.5 points, 3.9 rebounds. Doesn't sound like a lot, but Boston College is playing in the ACC. And on top of that, it's what he did at UMBC before transferring to Boston College. And that was, he averaged 19 points, 7.6 rebounds, and he's 6'3", he's a perfect combo guard. The dude's going to be able to score. I'm not saying he's going to average 19 points like he did at UMBC. You don't need him to, right? So you're going to need 10 to 11 points out of him, which is going to be very easily possible. I mean, he averaged 7.5 points for Boston College in the ACC, so I firmly believe that he's able to do this, even though maybe Boston College wasn't very good. Hey, they did get a win against Boise State last year, so you have that going for you. Anyway, so outside that, they also brought in Quentin Jones. He's had an outstanding year in Northern Illinois. He averaged 16.6 points, 4.8 rebounds, 3.5 assists. Look, Northern Illinois was not good at basketball last year. That's okay, though. He shot 45.5%, 35.5% from beyond the arc. Not like the dude was shooting 20% and just happened to be the only guy that could score on the team. So my point being is the metrics speak for itself, and I think that he's going to easily be able to be a contributing player in this rotation. They also have Brady Dunlap. He's coming out of St. John's. He only appeared in 10 games, but in those 10 games, he averaged 5.7 points, 2.2 rebounds. So again, it's kind of coming back to the same thing VCU did, right? You're bringing in guys from a higher conference that, okay, again, honestly, very similar to VCU, where I was talking about Tyrell Ward on LSU, and now I'm talking about Dion Brown from Boston College, like two power conference programs that maybe weren't good last year. But then it's the fact that dude played 10 games in St. John's last year. And look, I know he was only 10, but he had an injury. So, like, my point being, though, is, like, he was averaging 5.7 points for him. So it's not like he wasn't playing on one of the best teams in college basketball last year. So my point is, like, in particular, this top four could all be just outstanding. And I think St. Louis could easily win this thing. I think St. Louis also has a okay conference schedule. So with that being said, like comparing them, let's say compared to like George Washington, St. Louis has a better chance of making an at-large bid than George Washington does. So, it's going to all kind of come down. I'm going to finish the next one, and then we can kind of, let's talk. I'm going to finish the next one, then we'll talk a little bit about the problem of the state of the A-10 this season. Coming off that, coming into 5th place, I have a Dayton. Look, you might be like, dude, what are you talking about? I had Dayton like 3rd-ish when I really first started like kind of writing in these notes. In the meantime, yeah, the Iona transfer, Adam Nije, man, I should really look at how to pronounce names before I go on to these things. I've been bitten too many times. My point being, he was outstanding at Iona. He was going to be a huge, huge, huge piece for the Dayton Flyers this season, and then now he's caught up in some gambling problems dating back to his Iona days. Look, if they clear this thing and it was all whatever in the past, especially like now that you can freaking bet on pro sports. Anyway, by the way, guys, this podcast is not sponsored by Bet365 or anybody. So my point being, though, is if If he comes back, this raises Dayton's status because I think he was that important of a player for them. I'm not saying obviously he was the only player for them, but he's a very important piece. They have multiple other guys. For example, they have Keontae Jones coming out of the CSUN. He averaged 13.1 points, 8 rebounds, 4.1 assists with 1.3 blocks and 1.8 steals. Yeah, the dude was just good. He had a 4.1, 2.6 assist to turnover ratio. He was incredible on defense. He's going to be huge for them. They brought in Deshaun Montgomery. He's coming out of Mount St. His freshman year. I should say this. His freshman year, he was coming out of Mount St. Mary's. Had a really, really dominating year. Transferred up to Georgia. And you know how that goes. You don't maybe play as much. He still played. Still played for the Bulldogs. He averaged 6.5 points, 2.1 rebounds in 17 games. And then they also are bringing back Javon Bennett. He averaged 11.6 points, 2.7 rebounds, 2.1 assists last year for the Flyers. And there's other guys. There's other guys on this team, but I really do think that the loss of Nije from Iona is going to really hurt them. And I did have to drop them a little bit here. But I'm going to round this out by saying what I was talking about at the end of the St. Louis segment piece here. This team, this league is so good. I think the problem is going to be they're going to eat themselves. They're going to cannibalize themselves. And that's honestly what usually happens at the A10. But I think it's going to be even worse this year because you do have like 5 teams that could all win this thing. So, you might make it to the end of the year and there's like 5 teams that are like, they've won 13 or 12 games in conference. And the problem is you beat up on each other and now none of you have enough for an at-large bid. So my point being is like, they all can do it. I think George Washington, I think St. Louis, I think Dayton, I think Loyola Chicago, I think VCU, they could all win 16 games in conference. I just think that they're going to murder themselves. And I do think that's going to unfortunately hurt the at-large bid. But, man, if the committee gets it right, this league, well, okay. I'm also saying this on October 30th. But if everything goes like where I'm talking about here, and I'm thinking that the committee gets this right, we should have multiple bids in this league. And I think my guess is it's going to be one of these 5 teams that I've talked about here. Okay, coming in 6, we're going to start kind of going through these a little bit quicker here. But I have George Mason. George Mason is once again, you got to remember, this team won 16 games last year. They won 16 games in conference. Very good. They had a very good season last year, and they were a blast to watch. So this year, they have Braden O'Connor. He is coming back. He's our only main returning piece, but that's okay. He averaged 9.1 points, 2.8 rebounds, 3 assists. Again, I did a deep dive on this team that if you want to go to my Substack page, bracketbusterhoops.com, I have an entire deep dive into them. Highly recommend reading it because I think they're building a really good. I don't know if they're going to win 16 games again this year, but I think that they have the potential to be right there. And again, if this league kind of cannibalizes itself, easily win 11 to 12 games. They brought in Jeremiah Hill from Ball State, Dola Adebayo from Mount St. Mary's, Corey Mincy from Presbyterian, Riley Allenspach from Samford, Nick Ellington from Murray State, Jahari Long from Maryland, Masai Troutman from Northeastern, and Malik Presley from Texas. So kind of going through this list, here's like the puzzle pieces of how this works is like Jeremiah Hill was an incredible scorer at Ball State. Dola Adebayo was prolific at Mount St. Mary's. Corey Mincy averaged like 14 points plus a game at Presbyterian. Riley Allenspach was very good at Samford. Metrics are never as high because it was the buckyball system where everybody plays like 15, 20 minutes a game. But anyway, Nick Ellington, very good defensively. I've watched him multiple years at Murray State. Very good defensively. Jeremiah Long is coming down from Maryland, and Malik Presley's coming down from Texas, and Troutman had a really good season at Northeastern. So the problem with this team is like you're bringing a lot of guys from lower ranks up. However, it's guys that, again, I mentioned this earlier, but it's guys that like have proven track records at the lower level, and they're going to be able to come up and probably play with ease. I think. So Hill, Troutman, Adebayo, and Mincy, they all average 13 points or more per game. Long and Presley bring their experience from the power conference level. As I mentioned, Ellington is very good defensively. Allenspach brings that important experience from the Bucky McMillan system. Bucky McMillan is one of the best college basketball coaches in the entire country, and I firmly believe that. So again, it's like coming to that thing where it's like you can't name everybody into this like bucket that's like, oh, they could all win the A10, but George Mason could very easily be there too. I mean, this league's absolutely insane this year. I don't think there's much separation between them and Dayton and St. Louis, or them and Loyola Chicago. Like, I think the other teams have a couple more important pieces. Again, Loyola Chicago's got Miles Rubin. George Washington has Rafael Castro. VCU's got those power transfers coming in. So, like, I think those teams have something that George Mason does not. But that being said, if this all gels together, these are prolific guys coming down from lower ranks of college basketball that all could very easily contribute at a high level, just like they did previously. So this could very well be a team that, you know, in particular, Corey Mincy, I know was coming off Presbyterian, but Presbyterian's been playing better. It's not the old days of Presbyterian, like sub 300 Ken Palm. So my point being is, like, I got high hopes for him in particular. I think he'd be an absolute stud. I think there's multiple guys on this team that could all be huge offensive pieces. So look, simple as this, keep an eye out for the Patriots, man. I think they could be right there too. Oh boy, man, you want to talk about putting my foot in my mouth on this one. Last year, I made a bold prediction Duquesne was going to win like 20-something games. And then they started off 0-6, and I was like, oh boy, wow, this is rough. And it was 0-6 against teams they absolutely shouldn't have lost. They lost like Hampton, for example. I'm not saying Hampton's bad. I'm just saying that, like, you're losing to teams that you should not be losing to as an A10 school. So my point being, though, what I really like what Drew Joyce did. He went out and he saw where his issues were, and he addressed them. They had two main issues, in my opinion, that were glaring holes last year. Number one, their offense was terrible in non-conference. It got better as the year went on. But then it was also the fact they had absolutely no depth with height. And he addressed both of them. I still have a concern about the point guard play, but that's okay. Let's toss that out the window for right now. They brought in Terrence Ginyard. He's coming out of UT Martin. Absolute diamond in the rough jam by Jeremy Schulman down there. He averaged 16.3 points, 4.7 rebounds, 2.3 assists, and 1.3 steals. And if you're worried about him playing at UT Martin in the Ohio Valley, you shouldn't be. Against the power conference schools, he scored like 20 points against Florida. He scored multiple 20-point games against the power conference when UT Martin was just in bye games. So my point is, like, this guy has proven he can play at the higher level and still contribute that kind of quality of offense to the team. He's going to be a huge piece for them this year. He already dropped 21 points in their exhibition game against Virginia Tech. Cam Crawford's coming back. He started off a little rocky, but he was lights out in the A10. He shot 46.5% from beyond the arc. That was first in the conference. Huge piece coming back. Here's what really hurt them last year. A bunch of injuries happened. They had Alex Williams and Brandon Hall were out due to recovering from injuries from previous season. And then they also lost Jake DeMichelle very early in the season. So lost three pretty high impact guys that they didn't have at all last year. Pretty much, they had DeMichelle for like maybe the first 10 games, first 7 games, something like that. Not very many. DeMichelle was an important piece. Really cool story on him. He was a walk-on, and he ended up coming to Duquesne as a walk-on, and he worked his way to literally averaging over 20 minutes a game as a freshman and earning a roster spot, earning a scholarship. Really cool story. Like him a lot. So he's going to be very important coming off the benches here. Alex Williams, he dominated at Furman. I'm really excited about him. He averaged 13.2 points, 4.8 rebounds. He shot 43.8% overall and 39.9% from beyond the arc. Brandon Hall was on fire at JUCO. He played at Howard College before he tore his ACL, so he came back from the ACL. The Dukes also have Maximus Edwards. He's coming back. They have David Dixon. He's a monster in the defensive end. They have Jacob Nikas. He's played an important role for the last 2 years in Drew Joyce's system. And they also have, Jimmy Williams, They have Jimmy Williams coming in from South Florida. He had a very good JUCO year, and he also had 21 points coming against Virginia Tech just in that exhibition just recently. So the reason I don't have them higher is, number one, the 3 guys that got hurt, you gotta hope that they can come back and play at that same level they were playing at previously. And then on top of that, I make an example of that. Brandon Hall is coming off an ACL injury. You don't know how he's going to come off. He's going to come back to that. Second of all, you just need to figure out how everybody's going to work together and play together. I think they've addressed the issues. I'm significantly concerned about the point guard play. So for that reason, I have them at 7th, but I think the Duquesne Dukes could easily be a sleeper team in the A10 this year. So coming into 8th place, I have St. Bonaventure. And again, it's just really insane how deep this league is. I think that the Bonnies could easily be a team that competes at a higher level here in this league too. I like what they're doing a lot. Their only returnee that contributed a lot was Desante Bowen. He's a main returner. He had 11.1 points, 3.8 rebounds, 4.2 assists, and 2 steals per game last year. Shot 42.5% overall, just 21.1% from 3-point. So still good offensive weapon here. What I like, though, is who they brought in. And you're going to maybe kind of question where some of these guys come from, but let's let me rip through these names and then we'll talk about them a little bit more here. Caden Charles, he's coming out of North Georgia, the Division II school. He averaged 14.7 points, 6.9 rebounds. Mari Marshall, he's coming out of U Albany, 14 points, 2.7 rebounds, 2.5 assists. Daniel Egbueni, out of Tennessee Tech, he averaged 10 points, 6.5 rebounds, 2.3 assists. Frank Mitchell, he's coming out of Minnesota, 4.9 points, 4.7 rebounds. Daryl Summons II, he's a junior coming out of Gardner-Webb. He averaged 17.4 points, 3.2 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 1.2 steals. Braden Jackson, he's coming out of Buffalo, 4.2 points, 1.5 rebounds. And my favorite is Joe Grahovic, coming out of Fullerton, a JUCO. 15.9 points, 6.6 rebounds, 2.2 assists, and 2.7 blocks per game. This isn't even accounting for the fact that they have 4 really talented European freshmen coming in. They really hit the international ranks hard. If you want one of them that I think is going to crack the rotation, and you should really keep an eye on here, it is Andrew Asayui. I actually don't think I butchered that, so we're going to go with that. In the Italy Next Gen Cup last year, in 7 games, he averaged 13.4 points, 10.3 rebounds, 3 blocks, 1.6 steals per game. He's 6'9", he's got really good size. I'm not saying he's going to play a ton, but I think that he could be one of the freshmen that plays a decent amount out of the 4. They are all really talented. I'm really impressed by who they brought in terms of coming out of the European ranks. I'm really excited about seeing how they develop them. I like what St. Bonaventure is doing. Because, if you listen to Woj and some of these others, some of the other people in the program, they've talked about kind of embracing that step-up mentality where they don't care if you come in for just 2 years and then leave. So I think it's interesting because if you start hitting that international ranks a little bit harder, bringing in these guys who have experience playing in these really competitive, if you're coming from the U19 or U20, maybe you played not the same level as NBA, but you played a little professional basketball briefly. I have mixed feelings about the whole professional basketball thing, but it's not the same thing necessarily if you're like 19 years old. So my point being is you're hitting these guys really hard over there. I think you're bringing in some talent that could be sneaky. So what I like, though, about this team is they got creative, right? You have a D2 guy who's a lights-out shooter at North Georgia. You have some guys coming in from lower ranks. You have somebody coming out of U Albany, 10 Tech. You have a guy transferring down from Minnesota who proved he could play in the Big Ten. You have a guy from Gardner-Webb who averaged over 17 points per game. And then you also brought in one of the best JUCO recruits in the entire country. Joe Grahovic is one of the best. He literally had NBA scouts coming to Fullerton to watch a JUCO kid. That's how good he was. I mean, he's insanely good at basketball. This is my point where, I rank Duquesne higher than St. Bonaventure. I think you could flip-flop them. I think St. Bonaventure could finish 4th or 5th. It's like this league is so insane this year that I think you're going to have teams like this be able to sneak through. I mentioned Duquesne could be a sleeper. I think St. Bonaventure could be an even deeper sleeper. I think St. Bonaventure could end up finishing 3rd. I'm just saying, the talent of this team is really good. And what they are building, the whole Woj effect aside, what they are building at St. Bonaventure is something that's going to be sustainable moving forward. Like these small private universities that need to embrace this new culture, they need to take a page out of what St. Bonaventure is doing because it's going to be the way that these small private universities survive. And what they're doing and what they're building is going to be really important for the A-10, especially in the next couple of years. Okay, we're going to really start ripping through some of these. In 9th, I have St. Joseph's. This team's a mess. And I don't mean it roster-wise. I think they are talented enough to be much higher, but I think they were an injury or two away from being a complete disaster. And the drama around Billy Lange leaving it and the changes in the program, I just think the cards are stacked against them. They added Deuce Jones from LaSalle. He's a really good pickup. He averaged 12.5 points, 4.2 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 1.6 steals as a freshman. Brought Derek Simpson's back, but with Xavier Brown, Eric Reynolds, and Rasheer Fleming all gone, which, Jesus Christ, I can't believe that team didn't perform better than they did last year. Those 3 guys, I'm sorry, you should have won the freaking A-10 last year. At that point aside, this team is just kind of, I think the cards are just stacked against them. I don't like the team overall. I think has potential to be higher. I just don't foresee how they're gonna. I don't think it's gonna gel. I'll just end it at that. I don't think it's gonna gel well here. I don't really have that high of hopes. I will say this: they have a fan base that is very passionate, and they have had the potential in recent years to be something, to be a program outside of the non-conference rank, the power conference ranks, that could be dominant and could elevate the A10 to that elite status, especially to a multi-bid status. So my point being, St. Joseph's administration's got to figure this stuff out. They gotta, at some point in time, the alumni and the fan base, they were going to get sick of it. They were already sick of it. They got to figure this stuff out now. Give them a year, and I hope next year when I'm doing this video, coming into the 2026-2027 season, that I'm picking St. Joseph's in the top 4 of the A10, because anything else is going to be a huge disappointment for that program. Okay, rounding out, I highlighted at the very beginning, Richmond is a growing team. They're kind of getting things back on the right track here. I think they could be a little bit of a surprise. I don't think they're going to finish top half, but when I say surprise, I mean they could easily knock off a top team and really hurt some at-large chances here. But they have Jaden Daughtry. He's coming off an outstanding year at Indiana State. He averaged 12.9 points, 4.3 rebounds, 1 steal. They brought in Will Johnson. He's coming out of Loyola Marymount. He averaged 12 points a game, 3.2 assists. They have a ton of players. They have some really intriguing freshmen. I think the Spiders have something going here. Give them another year or two, and I think they're going to be right back into the pack in the race to win the A10 at some point in time in a couple seasons. I'm just going to go ahead and skip right in to Rhode Island here. Look, man, Rhode Island's just going to be okay. But I say okay, but I think they have the potential to also knock off some teams here very easily. Because when I rip off some of these guys, they added Tyler Cochran. He's coming out of Toledo. He averaged 14.4 points, 6.4 rebounds, 1.9 steals. He brought in Miles Corey. He averaged 13.8 points, 2.4 rebounds, 4.3 assists at South Alabama. Alex Crawford played at Fresno State. He averaged 11.5 points, 4.3 rebounds. RJ Johnson averaged 13.8 points, 2 rebounds, 4.5 assists at Charles Southern. And Jonah Hinton is coming in from St. Bonaventure. He averaged 8.4 points, 2.1 rebounds. So, when I rip these guys off, you're you could easily be like, well, why do I think some of these other programs that just brought a bunch of lower ranked guys in, why do I think Rhode Island's going to be so much worse than all of them? I think the other guys are just more skilled, if I'm being completely transparent and honest here. However, with that being said, though, they have a team that could easily, they built a really intriguing roster with guys coming in from the lower ranks. They brought in some intriguing freshmen. I'm not saying that they're going to finish top half of the league. I think they're going to finish bottom half of the league, but they could easily beat a George Washington. They could easily beat a VCU just on any given day. Here's the other thing too. I could see Rhode Island finishing better than St. Joseph's. Rhode Island could finish 9th in this conference. I think I smell a coaching change, I think, coming in that program pretty soon. But outside that, though, I think Rhode Island could be interesting to watch this season. We'll end it at that. All right, ripping through the last 3. Davidson, they have a couple nice guys. They brought in Sam Brown. He averaged 14 points, 3.3 rebounds at Penn. Josh Scovins, he averaged 15.2 points, 4.2 rebounds at Army. I think Davidson's got some stuff to figure out, too, on their end. Let's be honest there. I don't think they're going to be that competitive in the conference this year, so we're just going to kind of go on to Fordham. I like what Fordham's building. Fordham and LaSalle both have new head coaches this year. So Fordham brought in Mike Magpie out of UC Riverside. He was building a UC Riverside program up. He was really doing a good job there. This offer came out. He took it. Their non-conference is really weak, but it's good. It's good. When you're building a program from scratch, it's really good to schedule an easy non-conference, in my opinion. It's going to be one of those things that they could probably come into the conference play winning 8 to 10 games in the non-conference because it's that easy. I actually think statistically it's one of the weakest non-conference schedules in the country, if I remember seeing that stat correctly. But anyway, it's what you need to build programs. I'm sorry. Winning helps recruit. If you win 4 games in the Atlantic 10, but you win 10 games in the non-conference, you are really close to 500, and that makes recruiting people easier next year. So I'm a believer in doing that, even if it doesn't feel as good for other teams in the conference. So what they've done, though, is he brought in DeJour Reeves. He averaged 17.3 points, 5.5 rebounds, 1.9 assists, and 2.1 steals at Iona. They brought in Zariq Nutter. He averaged 14.2 points, 3.1 rebounds, 2.1 assists at Georgia State. They also brought in Christian Henry. He averaged 14.7 points, 3.2 rebounds, 3.4 assists, and 1.3 steals at Eastern Michigan. I think the Rams could be better than people think. I think they could bump and beat Davidson potentially. It's not good enough to get them even top half of the league. They're going to be bottom third. I firmly believe that. But they have the potential to knock some teams off, and it's not going to be the... I just really do think. I believe, I'm a big believer. I'm a big fan of Mike McPowell. I think that he's a great coach. I think he's a program builder. I'm really excited to see what he can do at Fordham. I'm going to be keeping an eye on him because I want to see the Rams get back to being, a good status. Because the amount of better teams that you can have in the Atlantic 10, the better chance the Atlantic 10 is going to be able to get to a 2-bid status consistently every single year, maybe even 3-bid status. So, I think you should be rooting for the Rams if you're a fan of the Atlantic 10 here. LaSalle, they're really going to struggle, man. It's simple as that. But you got to give Darius Nichols time. He was doing a really good job at Radford. They were trending upward in the Big South. He took them to 2 20-plus win seasons. He took the Highlanders to the CBI semifinals one year. I know it's a CBI, it's not the NIT or anything. But still, he was building up a Radford program in the Big South that is competing against the high points in the Winthrops of the non-power conference world. So my point is that him and Mike McPowell, I think, are both going to be really good coaches in this league. I think it's going to take LaSalle a little bit longer, at least in terms of this season. I think they're really going to struggle. They're not going to go over. I'm not saying they're going to go over in the conference, but probably 2 to 4 wins is probably going to be realistic for LaSalle this year. I hope I'm wrong. I hope. But, I just don't think that they're going to be able to compete at the same level as some of these other programs, considering where they're all at this point in time. Okay, we just ripped through 14 teams. And I think I said more times than I can possibly count that anybody can win this league. I do still firmly believe that. I think that any of those top 5, I think between George Washington, Dayton, Loyola Chicago, St. Louis, I think any of them could absolutely win. VCU. I think any of those 5 could absolutely win this conference. I think you could have a sleeper. I think you could have a George. In my opinion, you have those 5 in the upper tier. You have this middle tier, which is like Duquesne, George Mason, and St. Bonaventure, who could all surprise people. And then you have this lower tier, which is the teams like St. Joseph's, who could still compete easily. You also have a Rhode Island, who could surprise some people. You have a Richmond, who's growing things back here. So you kind of have that tier, and then you have the last tier, which is the 3, Davidson, LaSalle, and Fordham, who I don't think are going to be able to play super competitive this year. And also enjoy my cat in the background of this video if you're watching on video. My point being, though, I think this Atlantic 10 has the potential to reach back to a multi-bid status this year. I think that this is going to be the season that we see that happen. I'm really, really hoping that's the case because we need more mid-major. We need, if you don't want to call the A10 a mid-major, call it a non-power conference call it the upper echelon, I guess, if you want to call it that. But my point being, though, is we want more non-power conference schools be able to compete for an at-large bid because the world of college basketball is stacking it against them, and we need conferences like the A10 to get there. Look at what the Missouri Valley did real quick. For those of you that don't know, Missouri Valley implemented you have to play 4+ quad 1, quad 2 expected teams in the non-conference. It's a requirement. I don't care if you're Valpo. I don't care if you're Drake. Any of those teams, every team in the Missouri Valley has to do that. And I think, obviously, it's to build back to that ability to get to a multi-bid status because the committee is only looking at the metrics. They're looking at the quad 1 wins, quad 2 wins. They're setting themselves up for the potential to be able to get teams like when they got screwed with Indiana State. Or last year, if we were fearing that if Drake lost, was Drake going to get in? Things like that. They're trying to solidify themselves against that and build themselves a defense. I want to see the A10 do the same thing here. The A10 kind of has some extra built-in defenses because they have teams like VCU. They have teams like Loyola. They have teams like St. Louis, who has a really solid NIL fund here. They have, and of course, Dayton. So, you have these programs that are already higher status than the Missouri Valley, which you can make an argument about Loyola Chicago, but what Drew Valentine and them were building, they're getting to that point already. So with that being said, though, you have this upper tier of teams that's going to help carry that. The problem, though, is you got to get everybody else on board. And I think that you're getting there. You're bringing in the right coaches. You're addressing the right situations for the team in this conference. With that being said, though, like I think this year is going to be the year they do it. I'm really excited. I'm not trying to just like cram A10 people down the A10 agenda down people's throats. I'm just a big. I want to see multiple. I want to see multiple conferences outside the power conference ranks get bids in, and I think the Mountain West is down this year. I don't think they're going to get. They're definitely not getting 5 this year. There's no way. So I want, and the WCC could get 3. I think San Francisco is going to be right there with St. Mary's in terms of being able to get an at-large bid. So if you can kind of, let's say that the Mountain West doesn't get as many, you have St. Mary's who gets in pretty consistently and should get in unless something just dramatic happens. Maybe you sneak San Francisco in, and then maybe you get 2-3 teams coming out of the A10. I think the American's really weak. Memphis isn't even going to be as good as they used to be previously here. I think South Florida could get it to a 2 bid, maybe. I'm talking maybe. I think it's going to be a struggle for everybody else, though. I think it's going to be a real big struggle for the rest of the conferences. I think the Missouri Valley is going to be really good this year, but they do not reward the Missouri Valley. I think some things that would help is, again, with this new kind of like quad 1, quad 2 status that they're building into the schedule, it would be helpful if you get like a really good example is I think Belmont's a big sleeper in that conference. They have one of the best 3-point shooters in the entire country. If you get a team like a Belmont to go in and knock off some people in the non-con, and then you get, a Bradley or a Murray State. I keep talking about, if you follow me on social media, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to, I'm not a Murray State fan at all. But my point being, though, is everybody's sleeping on Murray State. Murray State has the ability to absolutely just steamroll people this year, and I don't think people are talking about it enough. So my point, I'm saying all this to be said, I'm an advocate for non-power conference schools. I think if we get the A10 to be back to a multi-bid status, that's not just good for the A10, it's good for the state of college basketball in a time and era where all the odds are being stacked against the conferences outside of the power conference ranks. So with that being said, thank you all for tuning in today. This has turned out to be actually quite a lengthy A10 preview here. I'm really excited about the league this year. I really encourage you to follow along, and I would just go ahead and drop this. But if you're not following me on social media, you can follow me at Bracket Buster Hoops. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky. I think we're going to be promoting a lot on Blue Sky this year, a little bit more than we did last year. Just with the state of where Twitter's going. Outside that, though, we post weekly newsletters on bracketbusterhoops.com. It is our Substack page. We've been doing roster reviews for the last several months in the off season. But then also we're looking at doing other things. Actually, we're bringing on some contributors. They're going to be talking about conference-specific stuff. We're going to be doing a Riser and Fallers weekly post that's taking over instead of doing a traditional top 25 mid-major list. We're not doing that anymore. We're going to be doing a Riser and Fallers list, which actually, if you haven't yet, if you're watching this video right when it comes out, I haven't even announced that yet. It's going to be coming out in a newsletter to kick off this season on Monday. Point being, though, there's a lot of exciting things happen, and I'm really excited to help grow the brand of some of these smaller teams and smaller conferences. So if you're not yet, do give us a follow, give us a subs. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Highly encourage that. I'm really hoping to promote the video content this season. It's something that I've neglected over the last year. I'm really hoping. I have some plans. I've gotten a lot of good feedback on some of the roster. I started doing videos again about a month ago. Got a lot of good feedback there. Got a lot of good analytics coming in. So really, and that was with zero promotion at all. So really excited about where that's going. So definitely, yeah. If you haven't yet, go to bracketbusterhoops.com, subscribe to our newsletter, or if you just want to watch videos, definitely subscribe down below. Hit that subscribe button, and thank you all. And I will catch you soon. And if you're an A10 fan watching this, best of luck this season.